Hey, what's up guys, Alex here and welcome to another video. So today is going to be a little different. I'm going to be showing you guys how I use layers in Photoshop. So a lot of you have requested different tutorials on Photoshop, and I know that a lot of you wanted to see just thumbnails being made, which I will do if I stream. I will do them after the stream, but for now I want to have a little bit of a tutorial for those of you who want to know more in depth about layers and how I make my thumbnails. So just to start off, this is Photoshop, the most recent version. I pay $10 a month for it. It's not the priciest thing, but it's also not cheap. If you want to use it for an entire year, it's like $120, but it's worth it. I use it every day, so there you go. So what I do when I start out is I click new and I go to film and video, and you can choose between 1280 by 720, which is HDTV, HDV, HDTV, 720p, or you can do HDTV 1080p. I just stick to this one because thumbnails are so small in videos anyways. They don't need to be bigger than 1080 or 1280 by 720, I mean. And then I get these nice little blue lines, which give me rule of thirds in these corners. Anyways, so for the sake of the video, I'm going to be making a Pixelmon Island thumbnail, just because that is a thumbnail that I use a lot of layers. Or actually, no, I don't think I should do that. It's not as many layers as a shell shock one that I think about. Alright, so we're going to make a shell shock thumbnail. So first of all, the layers are all right here in the bottom right corner, or bottom left, bottom right. I can't think today. Bottom right. And you should see layers here. And if you don't see layers there, you should always do window, and then you should see right here layers, and you can just do F7 as well, so that'll pop up right there. So right away we've got a bunch of things. So by clicking this right here, you can create a new layer. You can create as many layers as you want. Obviously you don't need that many. And then you can make a group of them. So if you want to keep layers in here, so if I have two of them and they're part of the same like image, I can just put them under there and hide them, so it's a little bit more organized. Usually I don't do that though. I don't need to. We've got, of course, we've got create new fill or adjustment layer. You really don't need this because it's right here, essentially, so you can do brightness, but usually I just like doing it from here because it's just nice and easy. And then over here is a mask layer, or a layer mask, sorry. Usually you will never need to do that, and if you do, I'd recommend looking up, I can't remember the name, but there's a program that you can learn Photoshop way more in depth. But for making thumbnails, I never need to use it. And then also we've got layer style. So layer style, essentially a easier way to do it is if you double click the layer, you get layer style here as well. So I'll go more in depth on how I use layer style. Everything else is pretty easy. You can lock the layer if you don't want anything to change on it. And then everything else you really don't use besides opacity and then fill, which is kind of like opacity, but not really. And then also you can change the type of layer, which I don't really do. Like I said, everything's pretty simple in terms of thumbnails. So to start off, I'm going to be doing, let's just name this one, it's pretty simple, and name it Shell Shock. So we're just going to keep that there. I'm going to Control T so I can freely transform it, and hold Shift. So, because if I don't hold Shift, it'll just weirdly mess up the aspect. So I hold Shift and it stays the same size essentially, and then we're gonna rotate that. I always like to have that at like a curve kind of diagonally. So now I have a text layer here, and you can also click text here and then it'll create another text layer. So if I hit like dad, then I have a new layer right here. So pretty easy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this, and I have my layer style. So we've got a bunch of different things. We've got bevel and emboss, which isn't really necessary for text. We've got stroke, which I use a lot, and I'll do that after I do my gradient overlay. So gradient overlay, you can do that, or you can also do color overlay. For the sake of the thumbnail, I'm going to do gradient overlay. I already have this one set as my default, but you can change it around. And for this one, we'll do rainbow. Why not? So you can mess around with this. You can do scale. You can change the position on where the rainbow comes from. So that's radial, reflected, and then diamond. So I always just keep it at linear because that's the most simplest one. And then you can change whether it's reverse or not. I'm going to click on not reverse just because I like that better. So now we're going to click on stroke, and stroke is the line around the text, and it just makes it look it pops out a little bit more than just keeping it plain and simple. And then usually you got position outside, blend mode, normal, opacity. It's at normal. I have 100%. And then you can, obviously you can change the size on however you would prefer, but I always just keep it at a nice 3 to 5. Okay, so now with drop shadow, you can do a ton of different things. You just gotta keep it on normal, so let's reset to default, which is my default. You can change it to multiply, change it to normal, whatever. It's usually the same. But there's so many different things you can do with your drop shadow. So for example, I like to bring out the shadow a little bit forward to the right behind, so it looks like the text is literally, it has a shadow and it's popping out of the thumbnail. You can also change the spread. If the size is like this, if you bring up the size, you can change the spread. But usually I always keep the size and spread at 0, so it's a nice thick, and like it's like a shadow, but it's not blurry whatsoever. So that's how I do my text. And of course, I'd say experiment with all these different things. You can do outer glow. I usually do that for, different things. Like in my Pixelmon Island thumbnails, I give outer glow to all the Pokemon. There's so many different things in here that you can just mess around with, like inner glow. I can make the text a lot brighter if I bring up the size, but there's so many different things you can experiment with, and I let that to you guys because it'll be your thumbnails or art pieces or whatever it may be. So let's move this up over a little bit more, and I'm actually going to bring it down over here because we don't want the text to be out of the thumbnail completely. So I'm gonna open up a image that I usually use on a lot of my thumbnails. Give me 1 second, and here it is. So I love using this meme / poker face thing. And before I totally forgot to mention this, but right here, these eyeball things, this is whether the image is hidden. So if you want to hide something just so you get a better view on something, or if it's distracting you, you can just hide it right away and then just click it and it'll bring it right back. So one thing to notice is that if you drag in an image like I just did, you will have this little piece of paper thing here, which you like right here. I'm trying to erase anything, but it won't let me because it hasn't been rasterized. So what you do is you right click on here and then you rasterize layer. Then now it'll be a normal layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press W, and right here I have my select tool. I'm going to click it again and then get my magic wand tool and just click on all the white, and it should cut out the white. So now it's just my little meme. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit, transform, and then flip horizontal because I want him looking this way. So Control T, hold Shift, and I'm going to resize him like that. There we go. Alright, so of course he's in front of the text, which we don't want, so we're going to drag him right under the text layer, and then now it'll be like he is behind the text. And then I'm going to give him a nice drop shadow. So this is right here, as you can see, the drop shadow is still similar. It'll change with the text, but it's still like the text. There's no blurriness, but with a person, what I do is I bring the distance to 0, and then I bring the size up, and then the spread up a little bit, depending on how dark you want that shadow to be. You don't want it too dark because then it'll become a stroke kind of layer, or line, I should say. But I'm keeping it right here because now it looks like he has a nice blurry shadow and he's popping off of the image. So keep that like that. Of course, you can adjust that however you want. And yeah, so now I'm going to drag in a picture of a shell shock map. Of course, here we go. I'm going to transform this because I want this to be a little bigger. I like having the image as big as possible. And of course, now my character is gone, so I'm going to bring the layer to the very bottom, and then I'm going to rasterize this layer. So one thing I like to do with the shell shock thumbnail is I press M, which is I think it's called, let me see what this is called exactly. It's a rectangular marquee tool. So what I do is I select right here where these blue lines end right here. I hit Control X, Control V. Now it's the same, of course, but right now I'm showing you guys how to use, if I double click this, I'm going to do an inner shadow, and right here now you can see there's kind of like a 3D-ish effect. So I'm going to bring up the size, And now that it looks like this, these corners right here where my mouse is are popping out, and this is pushed in. It makes the image a little nicer. I'm gonna see if I can find a good example of that. So here's a thumbnail I did for my Reinhardt video. As you can see, there's the inner shadow. It pushes in the image and it makes it look like it has like a nice frame around it. I think it looks really nice. Obviously, you don't have to do that for your videos. You can also do something else, and that's called drop shadow. And it does the opposite effect, where this whole image is popped out and then this is pushed in the frame. So there's a bunch of different things you can do. Don't do both. I don't think both of them, it looks kind of weird in my opinion. So I always just pick one or the other. So now that's pretty much all. That's the pretty basic tutorial of how to mess around with layers. I'm just going to finish doing this thumbnail for the sake of the video. I'm going to put in an 8-bit tank. We're going to rasterize this layer. So right click, rasterize layer, edit, transform, flip horizontal. So as you can tell, even though this is a layer tutorial, there are so many other things that you have to do with Photoshop to really make the image work and make things a lot easier for you. So I'm going to double click this, and I'm going to give this a nice drop shadow as well. That's a little bit too thick for me, the shadow, so we're going to bring that down. There we go. And then I'm going to do Control B. And what this does is gives me color balance. I'm going to make this a nice green. I'm going to bring the green all the way to the end, and then the cyan in yellow, bring that all the way down here. That's a nice pure green. And there we go. So that's pretty much it. With layers, you always want to be careful with, oops, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to drag that in. You always have to be careful with layers because, for example, if I left this like that, right, it just looks really weird. So you always want to make sure that the layers are all in the perfect place that you want it to be. So behind it, it looks a lot better. Obviously, you can see right here that I don't want that there, but just for the sake of the example, if I kept it like this, it looked kind of weird because you can see where it gets cut off. But if you bring it under behind the tank, it looks a lot nicer. And then that is pretty much it for what I do for my Shellshock thumbnails. I could show you guys another example of how I use a layer, and I'm going to do that right now for the sake of the video, and that is using a person with layers. So I'm going to get a good picture of Jerome. Let's see if we can find one. So here is a picture of Jerome holding a cell phone. So for the sake of the video, I'm going to show you guys how to do a layer on top of this without messing around, without it looking kind of like poorly pasted on. So I'm going to get a thumbnail of his, and let's just use this Chansey one, Pixelmon Island Chansey. So right away you can see that this island layer is of course on top of the Pixelmon one. The shadows are underneath the subjects, so Chansey and the Pokeball. And then of course everything, the background is the actual image. So anyways, I'm going to make this a lot smaller. And as you can see, if I just did it like that, it looked kind of poorly pasted on. But now what we're going to do is make sure we rasterize both of these layers. I'm going to hide the Chansey image for now. I'm going to press W. And you can also do, if you would like, you can do the polygon lasso tool. There's a bunch of different ways. And I'm going to hit Control plus and Control minus. You can zoom in. Space. There's a bunch of different ways. So one thing is you can do the select tool and you select this. But I'm going to use the polygon lasso tool. So what we're going to do here is we're going to select the image, the iPhone, and what it's going to do is that it's going to make it so, I probably shouldn't have done it this forward, but that's okay, we can fix that. We don't want the image to cut off like his fingers or something. So we can adjust all this later, and make sure when you're using the polygon lasso tool, you always want to make sure you close it, because otherwise it'll mess up. So for example, that's a pretty, not the best way to do it. So if I make this, oh, let's not do that. You want to make sure it's perfect before you do anything. And let's bring this over here. So if you have to make sure that your image that you're using is already set before you actually make any cuts. So obviously the image is too big here, so let's make this a little smaller and adjust it as best we can right there. So now if we select it again, and this time I'm going to do it with the selection tool, which is a lot easier here because it'll select all the black. But now you guys know how to use the polygon tool, which is essentially the same as using this. Make sure it doesn't cut off any of his fingers. By holding the Alt key, I can make it subtract any extras. So we're actually going to subtract this part right here because it's part of the phone, and this is part of the screen. Subtract his finger right there. There we go. Add this back in. Add that back in. And then there we go. Clean this up a bit. And make sure it's not too sharp and out of the phone. So there you go. So now that's all set. I'm going to do Control X or Control C. You can do Control X or Control C. Control C and Control V. And then hide this layer. And then there you go. So let's put this, let's keep moving this around till it's perfectly set. And then there you go. So now it looks like he's holding it, the actual phone with the thumbnail. Something that you can do too is you can also edit and then warp the image so that it fits. You can push it around a little bit. So it's going to look a bit strange, of course, but you have to be careful with how you warp things because it could definitely distort the image. So if I did that, there you go. So that looks a little better. But of course, you have to consider when you're doing a thumbnail like I am, the image, it seems a little bit kind of choppy here. But when you look at it from far away, for example, this is how big the image would look on an actual thumbnail. So if I pulled up a video right here, hold on, youtube.com, and let's say I pull up my favorite channel, the Game Grumps. Let's pull up their channel and look at their oops, autoplay the video. Hold on 1 second. As you can see, my computer is already zoomed in. Let's keep it at 100%. These images are all very, very small. All very small. So considering that, the thumbnail would be like that, essentially. So compare that to, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Here we go. So compare that to the, god dang it, Windows 8, please. So compare that to the thumbnail, and there you go. So you don't have to be worried too much about something being very blurry when you're looking at it very closely. That's pretty much it, guys. That is the tutorial on layers. Let me know what you guys would like to see me do next. For example, my next episode, I can show you guys. I know someone was asking how to do. Let me see. I want to check the comments. I know I want to shout who's had this idea out because they had an awesome idea to do different tutorials, etc. So the comment that let me know I should do this was was actually Harambe. Thank you, Harambe. He said I should do editing as well. So adding text, shadowing. So I already showed you guys how to shadow, how to add text. You can do just T. There you go. And then you can change the text, of course, by, if you double click this T, you can change the font, and it's very simple. You can do anything you want. You can make it a lot smaller. I always keep it at 150. You can center the text. I don't really mess with any of these settings, and I just double click and I just mess with the layers from there. So there you go. Very simple stuff. Like I said, everything I do is very basic, but it makes the thumbnails look very good. But other than that, I can also do a lot of editing, more actual editing, because I do edit Jerome's real life channel stuff, editing tutorials. And then if you guys would just like to see time lapses of me making thumbnails, let me know. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you guys next time. Let me know if you enjoyed this by dropping a like, dropping a comment, and subscribing if you haven't already. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys later.